Okay, could you please check the Twitch and Steam pages? Okay, just one more twist for the YouTube.
Yeah, it works on Twitch.
Okay, could you check if it is live on YouTube? Vera, could you see it on YouTube?
No.
Just refresh the page because I just switched the visibility of the stream.
Still nothing. No. I found it. Yeah.
Okay, so and on Steam it works too, right?
No, I can't see it on Steam. Oh, yes, it works.
Cool, super. Yes, it's really cool. That's right. All right, then we'll just go quiet for around 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll be back. Okay?
Okay. Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Anton. Long time no see.
Is this the same team here?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice.
But are we waiting for Sasha?
I
Is
don't
he
know.
going to
I don't
join
know
us?
if he's going to join because you see, it wasn't a kind of arranged meeting. It was just, okay, he was online, he said hi, and you drop a call, just join us, dude, and he just made it. I'm sure that he has now free time. I mean, I didn't plan this with him. Okay, I think that we can just get started. I'll just connect the video and shut down the music. Okay, guys, so today we are having our QA stream. Nice to meet everyone who is online here. Great you found time to join us tonight, or today, or this morning, depending on your time of the day. So, my name is Anton. I'm creative director of Beach Studio, and today we'll be joining with a couple of friends of ours. So, Daria, could you introduce yourself and the guys, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Daria, community manager for Bestower, and yes, today here are guys with us. So introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. I'm Raul. I'm a former community manager of Bestower, and I'm especially glad to meet old faces to chat together and memorize how the community process was taking over.
Okay, and
Thank you.
okay, so
I'm Alex. I just do stuff. Hi.
well, Alex actually does tons of work for community management, especially
Doing
with,
stuff means doing a lot of work.
well, because you never know what stuff means.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
quite vague.
Okay, so guys,
We have one more person here.
okay,
Oh yeah, hello, hello again, everyone. Do you hear me right? Okay.
yeah.
Yes.
So we've been joined tonight by Alex, who is a big friend of ours and used to do tons of things for Beast Tower and running the streams with me. So Alex, thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you will share your, I know, endless knowledge about video games and indie gaming tonight, because we have a very interesting topic. Of course, as usual, I need to mention that we are here for you, those who are watching us and want to join us by asking questions in the comment. So feel free to write any questions you wish about Beach Studio, about our team, about our project Beast Tower. We'll be more than happy to answer them. So it is just not us talking, but it is us talking to you. That's why we will be always prioritize your questions over just topic we're having tonight. Okay, so Daria, please keep an eye on the chats so we just can respond to questions as soon as possible. And meanwhile, I'll just tell a few words about what we're gonna be talking about today. Well, you see, it's a thing which sometimes will be asked frequently, like why you decided to make Bestow like it is, what was the background of your team, of just previous gaming experience, and vice versa. But you see, there is one particular thing which I believe is even more crucial than our individual stories. It's just a kind of our understanding how games are actually developed. I mean, not only technically wise, I mean, what kind of an engine, software, and tools we are being using or pipelines we are following, but just general approach and idea behind almost every game which one can find on the market right now. So you see, it's common knowledge that a lot of professional influencers, streamers, guys who work on YouTube and Twitch sometimes blame huge companies that they don't produce anything new. They just copy paste the games from the franchises or making just very subtle differences between part 1, 2, or even 3. And everyone is just being tired of expecting that some huge company would just have enough courage to make something really new, fresh, and generally still big. So, well, being honest, the main thing which behind such decision making is pretty simple. In just one word: money and profit, because huge companies, they can't be, you see, really risky about what they are doing. They just try their best to follow some kind of a recipe or some kind of a template, which generally usually brings them enough money to have good profits, and what's more important in common world of stock-owned companies is just the growth of profit. Because what is kind of a share or any other important paper which people buy in order to get some piece of the property of the huge studio, of a huge publisher? Well, it's a kind of like any currency you can find of the world, like US dollar, euro, or any other thing. All right. So you just exchange your money on some different type of currency, and you expect this currency to grow. So if you bought a share for $1, in a year time, you will be more than happy to find out that you can sell it for $2, making your profit was $1 in total. That's which make a kind of a really tricky situation when you just don't need only to have your game, your company, your publisher profitable, generally to be able to pay bills, to pay salaries, to just keep the offices running, and so on and so after. But you also need to show that you're actually earning, just making profit, just not just income, right? It's the money which you have left after you've paid for everything, right? You needed to pay in order to earn this money. And well, companies now, they want their profits to grow from year to year, which is quite a tricky thing. Well, I can just say tons of saying about the situation with Blizzard, when a lot of people were laid off because companies stopped showing the necessary growth in profits. So there was a huge scandal when people were fired, and then were in several months' time they published new job positions for the same stuff, for the same positions actually, which they laid people off from just 2-3 months before that. Well, it's money. It's things how it works. But still, I just noticed that from my point of view, from time to time, even huge companies sometimes get a risky and really uneasy decision to, okay, we'll make a huge but a really new and fresh game. From my point of view, this type of a game is a kind of a forerunner. This famous action medieval sword fighting and just cold steel fighting game. And guys, what do you think? What kind of other huge games, or games at least with some really nice budget, which came from a big publishing houses or famous developers, which were not just a copy-paste of a previous experience of this or that publisher or developer? Or for me, as I've said, it's For Honor. What would be your preferences in this field?
In order to not repeat myself, I would actually add Uncharted and Naughty Dog games in general, because I especially like what they did in Uncharted 4, because they really wanted to change the game, to tweak it in order to work in a slightly different way by using the PS4 hardware, and the game looks extremely beautiful. Although it's like the fourth part of Nathan Drake Adventures, but at the same time, this game was like ahead of its time, because it was 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and still this game, both in graphical way or in technical, like there's a jeep, like other vehicles in the game, they are so accurately detailed that it's really a joy to control them, and it's all in one game where you have like half an hour to control these vehicles, but they really made so many attachments to these details, and it's really perfect when global gaming studio like Naughty Dog, they are capable of adding a lot of small features to their game, and they actually have a huge budget thanks to Sony, but they are not going to jump. They are going to jump over their head, and this goes to some interesting experiments in the series.
But
And I'm talking about Last of Us Part 2, of course. This game is also a huge experiment where the plot with revenge is actually pretty interesting, and it was so controversial with the player base. So there were a lot of opinions on that game, and I think that this could be considered as a success from Naughty Dog experiment.
Well,
So,
but
yeah.
don't you think that it's a kind of, not really situation when they were doing something really risky because they were following a famous franchise?
They were making something very risky.
Yes, in terms of the overall plot, and as you can see, they leaked some of the parts of the plot from Last of Us Part 2, and a lot of people they convinced to not play this game at all because they didn't have that context on that. I won't be spoiling anything on that game, but there is a certain event where everything turns upside down during the game.
But what I mean,
So-
it's the actual gameplay mechanics because I can't say that. Of course, Naughty Dog are great dudes and they're doing marvelous things. But I would say that from my point of view, I consider their games to be more like movies rather than games, honestly speaking. And I can't say that they really were risky in terms of making some new gameplay mechanics and making the game of a new genre, or maybe just launching some really new franchise. It was still a kind of a Last of Us, which we've seen before that. I mean, in terms of what you can do actually with your characters. So same mechanics and same gameplay approaches. Of course, I understand the story is really main thing in this game, and it was really risky stuff story-wise. But as far as gameplay is concerned, as far as I see it, as a person who unfortunately didn't manage to play any of Last of Us, but watched these game movies on YouTube, that's why I can't just be 100% accurate, because in order to be accurate, you need to play the game rather than watch it. But what would you say in terms of gameplay?
I get your position because you're trying to say that the only thing they added is crawling under cars and some minor mechanics. But this game is technically interesting. It's bold in terms of technical decisions because this game is managed. They managed to run this game on PS4, and that's fantastic. It's like Red Dead Redemption 2 on PS4. It's simply amazing because they are technical. It's just genius.
Well, okay, and guys,
And-
what opinion? Sorry, Roll, I interrupted you, right? You wanted to add something?
No. I almost finished. So it's
Okay, sorry. Okay, guys, and
Naughty Dog.
what would you say in your opinion, the example which Raul put forward, such an approach when you make some astonishing graphics but still having the same gameplay doesn't mean that it's a kind of a breakthrough thing, or it's just okay. Guys had enough resources, so they use them in order to make better what they're already good at.
I mean, I would say that the game was already, I mean, the first part was already pretty, not just pretty good, it was almost like ideal in terms of just how it feels to play it. And in the second game, they just, polished it in a way that only a AAA studio can afford. Like, each time you use a weapon, each time you crawl under a vehicle, for example, it feels memorable. It feels really like you are. It's a step above the previous game, and yeah, actually there are some mechanical additions. For example, hook. If I recall correctly, there was no hook in the first game. When you can, for example, in the second one, use it to break the glass of the, for example, a store and get into it, or or you can reach some building, some which were not in the previous game. You didn't have the tools to reach it, but now you do. And also, if we're talking about PlayStation games, I would also mention God of War, one of the, if not the favorite game of all time for Anton, if I'm not mistaken. Because
Yes, 2018.
yeah, because the original trilogy of games and some of the spin-offs were completely different in terms of gameplay, in terms of just the story, of course, the overall atmosphere of the game, and the new God of War games, starting with 2018. It was a completely different game. And for example, I have a very good friend of mine who loved the original trilogy, but when he saw what they did, how they changed the gameplay, he just said, "No, I'm not gonna play it because it's not the game for me. I like the previous genre, not just action, third-person action, but slasher type of game. And this one is not it, so I'm not gonna play it." So I see why sometimes developers, can stick to their roots, stick to their formulas, but at the same time, I see that when they take a risk, they can make something even greater, someone would argue, than the previous entries. And for me, for example, I believe that new God of War titles are much superior in terms of gameplay, in terms of story, characters, and so on and so forth. Just different people, want different experience, even if the game is titled God of War. Now, different people expect different things from it.
Cool. And Daria, what would you say? I mean, just to clear up my position, right? I just talking about huge breakthroughs in gameplay, because if we talk about Last of Us, even about God of War 2018, still it's a kind of a game which, well, generally speaking, doesn't offer you some completely new gaming experience, right? It takes best from the practices which are already well known, but just making them on a completely different and new and unachievable level of quality. That, of course, is a kind of greatest achievement possible. But still, if we're talking about pushing the industry in terms of gameplay, I, even being a fan of God of War 2018, can't say that it's generally a new type of experience, which or a new type of gameplay activities, gameplay loops which you are following, which you generally can't find in the games which are already among the popular AAA titles. So what would you say, Neri?
I actually like that story Alex said about his friend, because the same was for me with the new Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom.
I mean,
like
after the one was after the Breath of the Wild, right?
yes, for the first glance, it seems like the same game. But when you try it, you'll feel like completely new experience. But sometimes it doesn't seem like a great experiment for me, actually. Yeah, but still, I believe that for me personally, most interesting games which experiment with genres is from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Japanese are making great games in terms of genre, but they actually love doing JRPG games. Like, I think this is where they really shine. Take a Persona 5, for example, great game.
It's
And
amazing title. I just love
yeah,
it.
yeah, but
Uh,
they're trying to utilize Persona 5 heroes too much. So say they have Persona 5 strikers, they have a lot of games with these characters. But yeah, these games in terms of UI, the stylistics, the overall design is just great, and I think some crazy stuff that only Japanese can handle, if you know what I mean.
I mean, if we talk about Japanese games in general, if we look at, for example, Square Enix, they actually make new stuff. They make new not entries, but new titles. Like, for example, recently I played Triangle Strategy. It's a game on Switch. It's completely new title, new world, new everything. So, and they do that pretty frequently. Uh, and of course, they have, for example, on the contrary, yes, Final Fantasy, which is like the 16th entry right now, is launching. But at the same time, they do a lot of different stuff. Yes, mostly JRPGs, but that's what they are good at, right? Why not keep on experimenting? Yeah, maybe Japanese games are more ready to not even games, but developers and publishers ready to experiment more.
Well, I just already shared with you my opinion regarding the Japanese gaming. I mean, I'm not a person who is really keen on Japanese games. Well, the most playable game of a Japanese developer, which I can remember, it's maybe Legend of the Dragoon. At some point on PlayStation 1, it was maybe the main competitor of Final Fantasy VII. It is not developed by Square Enix, it's a different company, but I really liked it. Unfortunately, due to some technical issue, I couldn't move from disc 1 to disc 2. That's why I didn't manage to finish this game. But you see, sometimes when I see what titles do Japanese produce, and when sometimes you can find on YouTube some videos like top 10 crazy Japanese shows, TV shows, I just would say that it's a kind of a really different culture with different tastes and different, I would say, popular things. That's why maybe for people from different parts of the world, it really looks so crazy and so fresh because we're just not used to this type of culture. And maybe in Japan, these things don't look crazy at all. They just think, okay, the kind of the usual stuff we are playing frequently. That's it. I'm not sure that I'm right, but that's the kind of opinion which I have personally.
I wouldn't say they are crazy. I mean, the games, for example, I just mentioned, they are not completely crazy, and they even have, English VO, English localization, so that they are made not only for Japanese Japanese audience, but for the whole world. There is a thing of, especially in Japan, that sometimes they make games and don't even bother to launch it anywhere else, don't bother to translate it for some reason. But I don't know, not all the Japanese games are crazy. I would just say that.
Oh yeah, that's completely true. That's completely
They
true.
just sometimes look extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, but you see, there are some titles like Resident Evil, which looks quite understandable for almost any audience in the world.
I think that's because they wanted to target to both American and European audience. Some of the Japanese games they were directly made to feed other audiences from other countries. Because there are a lot of niche Japanese games that are only understandable, and there are only Japanese players who know about these games. Like they are close from other countries, or they don't even have English translation, only Japanese. And these games are always in the shadow, and they could be really something unique, but we only know about those top Japanese games.
Well, you see, but the point
So-
is that actually Japan, and this way, this country is quite, I believe, similar to China. Well, they have a very huge inner market, and a lot of companies there, they just focus on this inner market, and they actually are not really maybe keen on making a game which would have a universal appeal. Because okay, we have a quite huge and really big market of our own. That's why we can just make games which we understand how we are making them and for whom we are making them. That's why should we bother? That's why maybe in this case they just I heard that a lot of Japanese games actually never get any voiceover except Japanese, and they use only subtitles. And sometimes I know the fact that even if they have an English version, I mean voiceovers, some people who actually don't know Japanese but really are keen on Japanese games and Japanese culture, they play the game to hear the Japanese voice, right? And just read the English subtitles, or the language which they are familiar with. It's a kind of, I believe, a kind of a one thing which depicts fans of Japanese gaming.
Yeah, for example, I play Yakuza series, and I'm so used to Japanese voices that I just cannot play them new titles with the
Yeah.
English one. So when I hear Kiryu, the main character, with English voice, I'm just like, no, it's not right.
Yeah.
Get it back.
Or
Yeah.
it's like watching JoJo in Japanese. Like
Mhm.
you can't even imagine watching in even English.
Yeah,
So
that's the
yeah,
same. Okay, but still, as far as we are moving on with our topic, I would say that I would believe that although we try to find some breakthroughs which big, huge studios and publishers can offer themselves, still, I would believe that everyone agrees that it goes without saying that most of the huge breakthroughs are done by indie teams, right? I would just name few which everyone knows and which grew into really, really new, even game genres, and the hugest companies and titles possible. I of course talk about games like Dota and League of Legends, in general the MOBA genre. Then like battle royale games, which started with PUBG, followed by Fortnite. Well, of course, Fortnite was a follow-up. It wasn't the original idea, with all the respect towards Epic, who made a very good game. And then things like battle chess, like what we say, games Valheim, for example, or Among Us, which are kind of really simple games in terms of technical development, in terms of what quality of graphics, animations, and general visual they offer. But in terms of gameplay, that's really, really super cool. Or the thing which actually blew my mind in terms of I figured out that it's really fun to watch it is of course Vampire Survivors, right? It's just very simple game made by one person, but still it's a thing which just turned into a big kind of a template for others to follow. I just seen so many, videos on YouTube, top 10 vampire-like games like Vampire Survivors if you're tired of playing this, and just different versions. Some dudes with guns are shooting zombies, other guys doing some crazy stuff and things like that. So what would you say? Do you agree that if we talk about real breakthroughs and creating something completely new in gameplay, creating new trends and new, I would say, tasting for gaming, that's of course products developed by indie teams? What would say you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and that's why every time there is a new festival on Steam, if I'm not mistaken, they have them like every 3 or 6 months. I mean, the demo festival. Each time one of these festivals, taking place, I download tens of games. For example, recently I played 30 games, demos. I mean, when I was participating in the latest demo festival. And yes, I'm trying to find something unique, something new, which have never been, or at least not in this format, been used by big publishers.
Well, we have Capcom games and Resident Evil, or like 4, 2, they all both have good demos, but I think it's more of a...
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. And this time there was a game, Lies of P, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It was made by a huge publisher, but it's an exception. It's just one title, big title, but everyone else is like indie, niche, small, and yeah, was trying to find something new. That's what I like about indies, that you can really dig deep into new genres, new experience, and find something new that can inspire you. For example, if you are a game developer yourself, you can find something interesting, something that you can borrow or use in your project. Yeah, it's totally fine. By the way, every new title is made with the it's a combination of ideas, and there is almost nothing completely new, and even new titles, new genres, as we call them, they are simply just a combination of something we have already seen, but it's just under a new source, new way of looking at it. Yeah, just wanted to mention that I really like indie titles, and I try to find something new every time I have the chance to.
Yeah, and actually, why this usually happens is, well, you see, sometimes people would say that huge companies, they have all the resources possible. I mean, money, teams, marketing, expertise, and so on and so after, right? And that's what makes them a kind of, 100% powerful beings, that they have no problems at all. But you see, all these their resources are which actually indie teams lacks, which is a huge minus for them, of course. But if we think deeply about this situation, we could say that, well, these resources which big companies owe are very big obligations for them. That means that they can't risk at all, because if they make something wrong, if they make a huge title which nobody would like and nobody would pay for, they will just collapse. And it would be not just collapse of 1, 2, or 3 people, but it would be collapse of many tens, hundreds, or even thousands of people who may lose their job, who maybe would have to leave their team, and so on and so after. That's why actually they can't risk, because in their play, in their game, stakes are too high. And if we talk about indies, they can do, go more risky, because actually it's the only way for them to take some part of the market. Because huge companies, you can't compete them in terms of visual quality, in terms of a content amount, in terms of quality of QA, although in recent time, we could say that QA is the weakest point of huge titles because they just neglect it, just to have the title to be on the shelves as soon as possible, just to start making profits. Well, but still, right? And that's why it's a kind of a big situation. So I would say, and I would really interested in your opinion with examples of games which which you played from indie teams, that well, indies has no other way rather than going and offering some new experience, offering some new gameplay. Because, well, I would say that, well, okay, guys, just tell me, do you know any indie team which managed to make a game which is, in terms of just general quality, I mean, visuals and so on and so after, just better than big companies' productions? Do you have any examples like that?
I mean, I would not compare in terms of just quality of textures, quality of lighting, shadows, because sometimes indie titles, they can be simple yet very visually appealing and memorable. And of course, indie titles cannot compete with AAA studios, but they certainly can make the game visually stunning. It doesn't mean that they need all these budgets, because beauty is nothing about has nothing with money. Actually, it's with art style. I would say.
Yeah, visual design.
Yeah.
So, and from your point of view, if we talk about this approach to visuals, when you make it shine, not because you use tons of polygons and super detailed textures or some crazy lighting, what games could you name which, from your point of view, are visually more appealing rather than most of blockbusters of AAAs?
Don't know if it could be compared, but maybe Hades.
Hades
Because-
or
Hades.
there's a
Yeah.
game called Grease. It's also a good game, like a platformer with stunning visual design of the whole level. Or Ori and the Blind Forest, Will of the
Yeah.
Wisps. Also
Yeah,
great game.
okay, but yeah, I understand that it's great games, and I
Visually stunning.
but it's-
Visually, they're memorable.
yeah, but it's actually 2D games, honestly speaking. And if we talk about some 3D games, I mean, which are actually in 3D space, when you can rotate camera and look in different directions, watch your character from different angles, or what game maybe you can name?
I think it's Outer Wilds. It's just unique in terms of planet design because it's a game where you visit different planets in one solar system, and each planet has its own unique style, maybe
Yes.
temperature, size, and it feels like not only like you're in No Man's Sky, global infinite world, where there are countless of planets, or upcoming Starfield, but it's just one system, but each planet has its own unique approach and design. So
But I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but Outer Wilds, I would say it's not a kind of developed by indie team. It was a quite already experienced team with a nice budget and maybe not AAA, not AAA
You're-
not
budgets,
AAA.
but
Maybe you're mistaken it with the Outer
Outer-
Worlds.
Yes, because this game is almost are being mistaken with Outer Worlds, and Outer Wilds is. But I think that Outer Wilds is 10x times better than. Yeah, maybe this is a bit controversial question, but I just think that in terms of emotions that the game brings, and Outer Wilds is just is basically top 50 indie games that brings you something emotional
Hey,
experience.
let me Google
So-
it because I
No,
okay
don't you dare to make mistakes in terms of these.
Okay,
I mean,
I got you what you're saying.
I would say I would mention probably Firewatch as well. It's a 3D game with a first-person view, and it has a very memorable art style. And yeah, I would say it's a good example as well. What else?
Okay, Fire Rush is a good game, and
It's
in terms
nice.
of the surroundings of this game, like some objects, they all they are in rhythm. Like everything is shaking to the beat, and it's kind of nice detail. It's not about visual maybe, but it's about how the whole world reacts to your gameplay style, because the whole world, it helps you to get into the beat. That's interesting.
There was some 3D platformer. I'm trying to recall the name of. I'm not quite remember it. I will get back if I remember it, if I recall it. Which was
Crash
also
Bandicoot,
no.
Spyro.
It was there was something in the hat in the title.
Ahead in time.
Hat in time.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, let me check.
Yeah, Ahead in time.
Yeah, Ahead in Time. So it's an indie game, which is like a 3D platformer, kind of like Crash Bandicoot and Mario 3D. But yeah, it looks stunning, visually very very nice, and something you don't expect from an indie team. Yeah, it's called Ahead in Time. Mm-hmm.
You mean a hat like, a thing which you wear on your head, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So you have one head that gives you different abilities. So you can choose between them by switching heads.
Oh, well,
So
yeah, it's like Super Mario World, if I'm not mistaken.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Odyssey, right?
Yes.
But you have this head to capture other creatures and to inherit their own abilities. So you like transform to the creature that you are able to head, like to capture it with
Well,
your head.
actually, you see, when we're talking about game mechanics and AAA, I think it's would be a shame if we not mention Nintendo games. Because from my point of view, although I'm not a person who play Nintendo games, who has a Nintendo Switch, although I would say that's a marvelous thing, especially for family gaming. Well, but I would say that in my point of view, although Nintendo is never after some astonishing visuals, they don't trying to impress you with the amount of, just when you see some kind of a shot from a game and you just see how much money is invested in every pixel. Well, no, in this case, everything is nice, everything is really clean, smooth, very simple and understandable. But what they are actually making the impact on is the gameplay. In terms of the gameplay, I would say almost every Nintendo game is a kind of very new and fresh experience. As far as at least once I saw, this crazy game when you're playing as the bro of Mario, who is Luigi, and he's going through a mansion filled with, different ghosts, which he can deal with using a vacuum cleaner. Do you remember this one?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I would say that Nintendo is a kind of a company which is really striking from all other AAA studios and publishers, because they don't bother much about visuals. Of course, they need, but they're not just shouting that I am next generation. I am just something which costs tons of money. No, they just was giving you a good gameplay and are okay with that. And I think that in their case, they are really not afraid to experiment. Well, of course, they have famous characters which they use as a kind of franchise, but they make so many different games with them. That's why I would say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that Nintendo just can't make
Yeah.
like
They are
a
limited by
great
their own
visual.
hardware. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the console is too limited.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say.
But you see, as far as I know, on Nintendo Switch you can find quite many games which can boast of with nice graphics.
You can actually launch Witcher 3, but at what cost? You have like awful graphics. Yeah, it can be launched and it's still a miracle. But would you like to play this visually stunning game on awful resolution? I think not. I think you'll prefer to play Witcher 3 with all the graphics from with
Well,
mods, with textures,
yeah,
in order
well,
to look nice because this game wants to be realistic.
well, maybe it's the point, but I would say that before the Switch, I'm not sure if Nintendo. Well, okay, guys, I'm not a big fan of Nintendo. Sorry, I just don't follow their titles and I don't follow their shows or anything like that. But I believe before Nintendo Switch, they used to have their games on all the consoles possible, or even
No.
on no.
No.
They always have their own hardware, right?
Yes, and they have always the exclusives. So I don't recall that, for example, Mario or Zelda ever released anywhere outside of Nintendo hardware. I think it's
Yeah, well,
something
yeah,
case.
it does make sense because you see, that's why everyone considers them to be quite a white crow in the family of AAAs because they're making tons of money and still they do a completely different thing because again, we have our own platform, we have our own store, and we have our own games, and we don't bother about anyone, generally speaking. Well, but still, what I like about them is that's why they decided to go in a completely different direction. If you compare them with other big companies that they want to press on the gameplay and on nice characters. Well, of course they're cartoony, but still they're nice and everyone just happy with them. Sorry for the off top, but recently I watched the new movie about Super Mario. It's a kind of it's a cartoon, it's 3D cartoon, but it's so well made and I really like it because it was on the one hand it's really simple, on the other hand it just insanely good how it plays with its simplicity.
I unfortunately I didn't see the cartoon, but recently I watched a very long video. It was 5.5 hours long. It was a very interesting video where a person was telling the whole story of all game industry, just from the very first game to present days. And there was a point about Nintendo and why they decided to go with this approach. They are familiar right now with. I mean, back in 90s, they had to compete with Sega. Back then there were actually two main competitors on console market. There was Nintendo and there was Sega, and Sega was technically more advanced. And at that point, Nintendo realized that they cannot compete in terms of visuals, but they can compete in terms of just gameplay. Yeah, they can focus not on visual beauty, but on gameplay diversity. And that's what they decided to pursue. And later, then Sony and Microsoft joined this race. They had much more budget than Sega ever did, and so they were able to smash Sega and kick it out of this market. So Sega doesn't produce their own software anymore. But that was a very smart decision on Nintendo's part, because they decided not to compete in terms of visuals. They don't have this budget. They don't have this much money. But in terms of just diversity and experience for players who prefer their consoles. Unique, very unique experience you cannot find anywhere else.
Well, it's a really interesting thing because, when I was a kid, we had three. Okay, when we were kids, there were at first time we had with my bro the first console, which was the 8-bit Nintendo. Well, almost everyone had it, or just playing games at that time. Then we were choosing whenever we want to get Sega or Super Nintendo, and well, for some reason we chose Super Nintendo, which I consider to be a mistake because on Sega at that time, if you take the epoch of 16-bit games, there were far more interesting games on Sega rather than on Super Nintendo, unfortunately. Well, and that's why it sounds a bit strange because as far as this research you're talking about is concerned, Nintendo was hitting with more gameplay rather than with graphics. Although at that time I remember when Super Nintendo and Sega were compared, people would say that Super Nintendo was far superior. Well, maybe not that big, it was still a 16-bit console, but it was made after Sega Mega Drive was put into production, and it just was a bit better with dealing with different visuals, honestly speaking. That's why, it's really, really new stuff which I learned because I've never just ever saw that Sega was more superior than Nintendo. Or maybe you talk about the time when they started Sega Saturn.
Maybe yes. I don't quite remember the name of this device. Yeah, probably. Because we had a pretty different situation from, for example, United States, from the United States or Europe, even that we didn't have access to in Russia. I mean, to licenses to official games. Yeah, so many titles we received were not the best quality, or some of them just didn't appear on our market at all until much later. That's probably one of the reasons. So we just didn't have access to the whole library of games, if we compare it with American, for example, players.
Yeah,
Japanese.
that's the point. That's the point. Okay, so I would say that we have around 5 minutes left. And Daria, could you please check if there are any questions in the chats?
No.
And meanwhile, I'll just maybe want to somehow make a sum up. So the topic was of our talk today. That's why, okay, how new genres are being developed, right? Of course, we talked about several examples when huge, big, and wealthy companies try to do something new, well, at least with their own franchises and famous titles. But still, as far as history shows, and I believe we have all this in common, that it's the indie teams which are really pushing the industry forward, or companies which I could name any other except Nintendo, which are really, really crazy on making gameplay. And that's why they keep their games technically as simple as possible. That's why they have enough, well, they just spend money on the experiments, okay? They say, okay, we don't have the toughest graphics possible, we don't need it, but we will spend this money to make 3, 4, 5 more prototypes to figure out the gameplay, which is really cool. And well, companies which aim on visuals, they actually don't have such an opportunity because you see, well, so much money is invested into the projects and they are so expensive. That's why you don't have any opportunity but to, use some figured out and effective formula of gameplay, because you just don't have time. All your time is spent on making more and more content and just polishing the visuals. That's the thing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why what I would say that, well, for me personally, what would be the most marvelous thing which only one can expect in the future, that there would well, the development of especially game engines, which actually used by almost every indie team, apart from some really hardcore guys who make their own engines or software to produce the game with. I would say that I would really love to see if Unity, Unreal, or any other engine would finally decide that it's the approach of Nintendo which actually really makes a point for indies. Because you see, even if you want to make a game on a, one would say, ready solution like mentioned Unity or Unreal, you still have to get a very profound technical background. So to become a programmer or some kind of a tech guy. So it's not a situation like with Photoshop or some 3D software that you can spend a week, 2 weeks, months, and just to be already quite well know the tools and to understand what you can do with them, right? In order to make a game in Unity or Unreal, well, it just takes lots of effort, and sometimes it's really hard to go below these templates which you are offered by the game production team, the engine production team, sorry. But if you are an indie, you need to have tools which would let you experiment. That's why I would be more than happy to see that some really not really technical demanding tools, something really simple in terms of, you know, UI, in terms of knowledge which a person should have, would appear, so you can easily prototype and test out different, some unique gameplays which are maybe look really crazy, but which would let you to push the industry forward. Well, that's my personal dream, and I hope that one day it will come true.
Yeah, let's
I
all
agree.
believe that. Let's all hope so.
Okay, Daria, and just maybe you would, or I would say, is Alex, I mean, we have two Alex with us.
Yeah,
can-
So I would
suppose.
just use a nickname in order not to, you know,
Yeah.
to mess. So Happy, you just being silent for most of this time, but what's actually your opinion and view of the situation? So uh, is it true that the indies are really ones who really push the industry, and AAA studios are just following them? What would you say?
I mean, from my experience, most of the indie game devs are doing what most of AAA companies don't do gameplay wise. Like there was a topic about graphics. So I'm kind of believe that indie games do give like new brief to like some old gameplay ideas, loops, whatever. Graphics don't really matter, and I think most of the indie players, they don't really need graphics because they know that those indie developers are not experienced enough, so they don't really look for graphics in a way. I think it's all about gameplay, and which I do think more important. And for like, for example, like if you're gonna look for example, Call of Duty, it's the same gameplay from title to title, but there are some indie shooters that give something new into that gameplay loop. So yeah.
Okay, so guys, it's just time, which is our stream is going to an end. So I really appreciate everyone who being with us and watching us. Thank you very much. Please support us with like, shares, reposts, follow us in all the social media possible. tell about our social media your friends, and if you have an opportunity, support us on Patreon. That really makes a change for us. And also, I would love to say that I was more than happy to see you all today and talking about on such an interesting topic. That's why I would just say that it was great meeting you again. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was just really unexpected that both Alex says, sorry guys, and Raul will join us tonight or today. It doesn't matter. Well, thank you all for being together, of sharing your knowledge, for telling about your favorite games, and with all these things which honestly I wasn't familiar with before. So guys, see you soon. Follow us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the beast will come.